Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I'll be making juicy meatballs with rice and a sweet and sour tomato sauce, Russian style. Now before we begin, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and let's get cooking. First, we're gonna start off by partially pre-steaming our rice for our meatballs. So in a microwave-safe bowl, I put 1/3 cup of long grain rice. I used jasmine today, but you can use any long grain rice. And I added a cup of water. Now we're gonna put this in the microwave for 2.5 minutes to pre-steam the rice a little bit. You don't wanna put raw rice in the meatballs because the rice may not fully cook through. Take a few grains of rice, give them a pinch, and they're just about 1/3 of the way done. That's exactly what we want. I do still have a little bit of water left, which is normal. That's okay, we're gonna strain that off right now as long as the rice is ready. We're going to get started on our sauce first. We want the sauce to cook down and reduce a bit as we're making and forming our meatballs. This will enhance the flavors before we put the meatballs in the sauce to cook. Grab a big pot or Dutch oven and place it on the stove. Turn the heat on to high. I'm gonna pour 2 quarts of organic chicken stock into the pot. If you don't have chicken stock on hand, you can use beef broth, vegetable broth, or water. If you're using water, just season it a little bit heavier so the sauce doesn't lack in flavor. To my chicken stock, I'm gonna add 16 ounces of unseasoned pureed tomatoes. I happen to have a 16-ounce container, otherwise you can use 2 8-ounce cans. Now I'm gonna whisk everything together to dissolve the tomato sauce. Now let's add our seasonings. I'm adding 1/3 cup of sugar. Don't be shocked, 1/3 cup of sugar is not a lot for 2 quarts of liquid and 16 ounces of tomato sauce. It will balance the sourness of the tomatoes beautifully. This is a lighter sweet and sour sauce, so you get the sour from the tomatoes and the sweet from the sugar. Now I'm adding 2 tablespoons of dried dill and 2 teaspoons of dried parsley. I'm gonna start with 2 teaspoons of salt and about a teaspoon of pepper. We can always adjust the seasoning once the meatballs are done cooking in the sauce. The meatballs will impart their own flavors into the sauce as well. Now give it a good whisk and try to get all the dry spices off the sides of your pot so they don't burn. Bring your sauce to a boil, give it another whisk, and reduce the heat to medium and let it simmer while we make and form our meatballs. Now let's get started on making our meatballs. So in this mixing bowl, I have 2 pounds of ground beef. I'm gonna season it well with a few big pinches of salt. Beef loves salt. And fresh ground black pepper, and lots of it. Beef stands up to black pepper very well, so be generous. Now I'm gonna add 1/2 cup of unseasoned breadcrumbs, 1/2 cup of milk, a few cloves of crushed garlic, and we're gonna add 2 eggs. Now we're gonna chop some parsley. I've already gone ahead and removed the thick stems and chop the parsley as fine as you can. It doesn't have to be tiny and it doesn't have to be perfect. You wanna see the pieces of parsley in your meatballs. Now we're gonna add our chopped parsley and last but not least, our drained parboiled rice. Now the best way to mix this is with your hands. That way you're sure that all of the ingredients will be well incorporated. I tend to over-season my meatballs, my Salisbury steaks, my hamburger patties, because I'm not a big fan of trying raw meat for seasoning. My grandmother used to taste all of her raw meat, whether it was beef or chicken or pork. I couldn't stand to watch her do it. So I tend to over-season just a little bit. Now once the meat is well mixed, you practically can't even see the rice. It acts as more of a binder and you can't really tell it's there. But there's something special about the taste and the texture of these meatballs because of the rice that you just can't explain. It's really worth putting in there. I've lined a baking sheet with parchment paper and I brushed just a little bit of oil on it so our meatballs don't stick. Now to make sure that all of our meatballs will be equal in size and so they're easier to form, I'm gonna use a spring-loaded ice cream scoop. It's about 2 tablespoons per scoop. Get a full scoop of your meatball mixture and start layering it out on your greased baking sheet. I got 22 meatballs out of this. Now we're gonna start rolling our meatballs into evenly shaped balls. I find the easiest way to do this is grab a cup of water, wet your hands, take a meatball, and form it into an even ball. Well, as even as you can. And we're gonna place it back on the sheet pan. Continue rolling your meatballs until you're all done. Once you're done, they'll be ready to go in the sauce and cook. That looks good to me. Let's give the sauce one more stir and taste for seasoning. That's perfect. Now we're gonna gently lower our meatballs into the sauce. I like to lower them into the pot one by one in a circular pattern and laying as we put our meatballs in the pot. That will ensure that they don't stick together while cooking. Once you're placing your last meatballs in the pot, it'll seem pretty full and some of your meatballs will be popping out of the sauce. We're gonna let it come to a boil and then we're gonna turn the heat down just a little bit, cover them and simmer them for 25 to 30 minutes. Now that the meatballs have come to a boil, you'll see some of the spices have floated to the top. So we're gonna push the meatballs down gently and that'll help flip them over so they cook evenly and it'll help incorporate the spices back into the sauce. I'm making a mess again. But if it doesn't get all over the place, you don't want it in your face, right? Now we're gonna turn the heat down to simmer. And I'm gonna close the lid and leave just a little crack open on the side to allow the steam to escape and so it doesn't boil over. We're gonna let this boil for about 25 to 30 minutes. You do wanna check on it periodically, make sure it's not boiling over. If it is, you can remove the lid and let them finish cooking without the lid. You're just gonna add an extra 5 minutes to the cook time. So our meatballs have been cooking in the sauce for about 35 minutes. Oh my God, look at these beautiful meatballs simmering in the sauce. Look at this gorgeous meatball. Now let's give it a gentle stir so we don't break up any of the meatballs. And we're gonna taste the sauce for seasoning. Perfect amount of salt, perfect amount of pepper. It's just a tiny bit sour and just a little bit sweet. None of the meatballs fell apart. Now this is a thinner tomato sauce than you would typically see. In Russia and the Ukraine, we typically serve it over mashed potatoes. I'll leave a link to my best and creamiest mashed potatoes in the description down below. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. If you did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my recipes. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.